Former Genesis lead singer Phil Collins is a legendary artist whose mesmerizing performances have enchanted fans all over the globe. Collins has been an integral part of many people's lives through his music, which began as a drummer and has since blossomed into a solo career. But behind the scenes, he's been dealing with serious health issues and personal struggles. Tragically, his problems have recently escalated, severely limiting his capacity to keep performing. Phil Collins has made a name for himself as a singer, songwriter, producer, and musician since his birth on January 30, 1951, in London, England. Collins was gifted a toy drum set when she was 5 years old, demonstrating her early passion in music thanks to her lively and creative family. This first spark ignited a love for music and drumming that would last a lifetime. Collins had been playing in bands and perfecting his drumming and vocal abilities by the time he was a teenager. Over the course of his 50-plus-year career, he has played in a wide variety of musical contexts, including rock, pop, jazz, and film scores. Collins is well regarded in the industry for his unique style and ability to play a wide variety of musical instruments. His legendary stature was further cemented by his solo career. In addition to his contributions to Genesis, Collins had unprecedented popularity in the 1980s while performing alone. His popular songs Against All Odds, Another Day in Paradise, In the Air Tonight, and In the Air Tonight all become global anthems. His talent to combine stirring lyrics with striking melodies was on full display in these songs, which struck a chord with listeners all over the globe. His unique approach to drumming, which included the gated reverb effect, became instantly recognizable and had a significant impact on the world of music production. Beyond his solo work, Collins' impact was felt. He became the lead singer of Genesis in 1975 and oversaw the band's transition from progressive rock to pop rock, which was an essential change in the band's sound. Genesis were one of the most prominent bands of their day, cemented by albums such as Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance. Collins' versatility as a musician is on full display in his work across genres, from rock and pop to jazz with the Phil Collins Big Band and critically praised film compositions like Disney's Tarzan. His versatility and accomplishment as a musician were further established when his song You'll Be in My Heart from Tarzan won both an Oscar and a Golden Globe. Significant changes would follow the beginning of Genesis, and this foundational time laid the groundwork for them. Peter Gabriel, Anthony Phillips, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks were classmates at Charterhouse School when they established Genesis in 1967. The band's early songs displayed a distinct progressive rock style, initially impacted by pop and folk. In 1970, Phil Collins took over for John Mayhew as the drummer for Genesis. Because to Collins' energetic drumming technique, the band's sound took a significant leap forward at this point. In 1971, with the release of Nursery Crime, his debut album with Genesis, he demonstrated his abilities and established the framework for the band's future creative trajectory. There was going to be another big shift in the band's direction soon. Lead singer Peter Gabriel departed Genesis in 1975 to embark on a solo career. While for other bands this departure could have meant the end, for Genesis it was the start of something new. Collins, who had been performing backing vocals, was chosen by the band to replace a number of other hopeful lead singers after extensive auditions. An essential turning point for Genesis was marked by this choice. Collins oversaw Genesis' transformation from a progressive rock outfit into a pop rock band with a more approachable sound, attracting a wider range of viewers. A Trick of the Tail, released in 1976 and featuring Collins as lead singer, was well received by critics and listeners alike, eventually peaking at 3 on the UK albums chart. Songs like Ripples and Dance on a Volcano stood out on the album and showcased Collins' range as a vocalist. Wind and Wuthering 1976 and Then There Were Three 1978 were more successful albums by Genesis that built upon this foundation. Their first single to reach the top 10 in the UK and the top 40 in the US, Follow You Follow Maine, was featured on their second album. This proves that the band's attempt at pop music was a success. The pop-rock transition was confirmed with the publication of Duke by Genesis in 1980. The Duke Tour solidified their image as a formidable live act, while the album's singles Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again were essential radio smashes. Abacab, the band's 1981 album, showcased a more experimental sound with a refined production, marking yet another advancement. No Reply at All, Man on the Corner, and the title tune Abacab were all successful singles that demonstrated the band's capacity to stay true to itself while still experimenting with new sounds. The 1986 publication of Invisible Touch was a watershed moment in Genesis' career. Title track Invisible Touch, Land of Confusion, and Throwing It All Away were among the top 5 singles that came from this commercially successful album. Thanks to the massive popularity of their 1980s single Invisible Touch, Genesis rose to the status of one of the world's most famous bands. There was no way the Invisible Touch tour could have failed. Showcasing spectacular theatrical performances that attract enormous audiences, one of the most famous performances by the band occurred in 1987 at Wembley Stadium, and it was noted for its powerful set list and breathtaking visuals. Genesis maintained their strong record releases and sold-out tour dates well into the 1990s. It's Like I Can't Dance and No Son of Mine from albums like 1991's We Can't Dance demonstrated the band's enduring popularity and talent for creating captivating music. Many landmark concerts have occurred throughout Genesis history, and each one has been legendary in its own right. Their 1978 headline performance at the Nebworth Festival solidified Genesis' status as a preeminent progressive rock band, and it was one of their most memorable early performances. Genesis capitalized on this momentum by delivering even more mesmerizing live performances. In 1987, as part of the Invisible Touch tour, another amazing performance occurred at Wembley Stadium. Many consider this Genesis performance, which they gave to a sold-out audience, to be among their best. Their standing as rock idols around the world was further cemented by the spectacular stage production and the band's aggressive rendition of hit songs, which left an unforgettable impression on the crowd. Phil Collins has had to overcome some crucial obstacles on his way to his phenomenal achievement. Tragic difficulties have emerged as a result of his health's sharp decline in recent years. Hearing loss, spine problems, and neuropathy are just a few of Collins's many health conditions that have severely hindered his performance. Collins disclosed his type 2 diabetes diagnosis and subsequent foot infection and subsequent hyperbaric chamber therapy in 2017. His mobility has been significantly diminished due to this illness and a number of other health issues. Collins is now wheelchair-bound and frequently sits during concerts because of his impairments. A back injury that caused debilitating nerve damage and made him unable to play the piano or drums was the most catastrophic of his health problems. His hands have not fully recovered from the injuries he sustained on a Genesis tour, even after a successful operation. For an artist whose drumming was once his calling card, this setback has hit close to home. Tragically, Collins may have performed with Genesis for the last time in March of 2022, marking the end of an era. Fans and fellow musicians were deeply moved by his weak performance, which brought attention to the seriousness of his health problems. From 2020 to 2022, Genesis went on their final Domino tour. It was very important for the band and their fans to have one last show at London's O2 Arena. Collins and Genesis triumphed through the challenges, and their concerts were unforgettable, honoring their lasting impact and the deep bond they shared with their fans. Throughout his time with Genesis, Phil Collins was notable for the band's unfaltering dedication to their music as well as its continual progression and invention. Throughout his career with Genesis, Collins was an integral part of the band's meteoric rise to fame, first as a drummer and later as the band's magnetic frontman. As successful as Phil Collins has been professionally, his personal life has been everything but smooth sailing. His 3 marriages have each been difficult and emotionally taxing in their unique ways. Collins wed Andrea Bertarelli for the first time in 1974 at Genesis' Vancouver performance. They had met when Collins was a kid in a London theatre class. They tied the knot in 1975 and welcomed Simon and Jolie, the latter of whom Collins took into adoption. Their relationship, however, suffered under the weight of Collins's rapidly expanding music career and extended tours. They divorced in 1980, with Collins pointing to the stress of his job as a major reason for the breakup. Collins wed Jill Tavelman in 1984. Lily Collins, their daughter, is an accomplished actress. The strain on Collins' marriage was enormous due to his solo career and his continuous touring with Genesis, despite their best efforts to stay together. Collins' adultery and their incapacity to put their differences aside led to the downfall of their relationship. During their 1996 divorce, Collins allegedly sent Tavelman a lengthy letter outlining his feelings, which caused a great deal of controversy and media attention. Oriane Sevi, a Swiss citizen who served as Collins' interpreter during his 1994 tour, was Collins' third wife. They tied the knot in 1999 and welcomed boys Matthew and Nicholas into the world. But there were also difficulties in their relationship, especially after Sevi suffered from postpartum depression after the birth of their second child. Collins paid one of the biggest settlements in British celebrity history at the time of their high-profile 2006 divorce, which ended their marriage. Collins' music and career were profoundly affected by the difficulties he faced in his personal life. His continual travels with Genesis caused friction in his first marriage to Andrea Bertarelli. Just days after their son Simon was born, Collins embarked on a 2-year tour. Their final divorce was heavily influenced by Bertarelli's feelings of abandonment and the stress he caused. Collins' solo album Face Value, which included the popular song In the Air Tonight, is characterized by raw emotion and is clearly impacted by his sadness over the breakup of this marriage. Collins found an outlet for his grief and a public way to express his feelings through the song, which was full of wrath and sadness. Even after his second marriage, he continued to let his inner turmoil inform his music. Jill Tavelman, his second wife, had a profound impact on his professional life as well. The tension in their relationship was highlighted by Collins' decision to convey his feelings through fax, which the media interpreted as his divorce by fax. Songs like I Don't Care Anymore, from his second solo album Hello, I Must Be Going, were inspired by the inner upheaval he was experiencing during this period. He became famous for making deeply personal and relatable music when his songs, which were based on his tribulations, struck a chord with others going through similar situations. Oriane Sevi's divorce from him after his third marriage was a devastating emotional blow. Collins had acute pancreatitis and other serious health problems as a result of her deep depression and heavy drinking following their divorce. He later drew inspiration for his music and performances from his battles with alcoholism and the mental anguish of child separation. In spite of these obstacles, Collins and Sevi were able to mend their relationship, and he even relocated to Miami to be with his kids and spend time with Sevi again. Collins served Sevi with an eviction notice following her remarriage in 2020, adding more drama to an already troubled relationship, and would not budge from his Miami residence. Collins' commitment to his music was constant even while he struggled with his own personal issues. He composed some of his most moving and timeless music by expressing and working through his deepest feelings of emotional anguish. Collins' tenacity and love of music saw him through the difficult times, and he remains one of the most prominent musicians of his generation, even though his personal problems had a significant influence on his career. Phil Collins has had an incredible musical career, but it has been shaped in part by the severe health problems that started to show up in the late 90s. His left ear's abrupt deafness in 2000 was one of his earliest serious health problems. For a musician whose livelihood rested on his ear, this ailment, sometimes called an oral stroke, was a fatal blow. Although he saw multiple doctors for therapy, the initial prognosis was dismal due to the viral illness that caused his hearing loss. Collins eventually got most of his hearing back, but this episode marked the start of a string of health problems. While on a Genesis reunion tour in 2007, Collins severely injured his spine. His hands were damaged by nerve damage caused by displaced vertebrae in his neck. The neurological damage prevented him from playing his principal instruments, the piano and drumsticks, even after the operation was a success. He had always loved performing live, but this was a major turning point in his career because it drastically hampered his capacity to do so. Collins' performance took a major hit due to these health issues. At first, he had trouble with the fundamentals of drumming, such as balance and spatial awareness, due to his left ear's hearing loss. Even though he kept performing and recording music, he had to adjust to these new circumstances. Despite the challenges he faced, Collins was resolute in his decision to carry on with his career. The ensuing vasculitis and spinal damage made matters even more difficult. The piano and drums were next to impossible to play. Collins taped drumsticks to his hands and tried other adaptation techniques, but none of them held up throughout performances. Collins did not allow his love of music to wane in the face of these physical restrictions. So that he could continue to be associated with music without the physical constraints of drumming, he moved his concentration to singing and producing. Collins made his retirement from music public in 2010, with health problems given as the main cause. But he couldn't stay away for long because of his intense passion for performance and music. Despite his persistent health issues, he decided to come out of retirement in 2015. Because of his disability, Collins had to adapt to performing while seated and relying on a cane for support. His determination and drive to perform were on full display in all that he did, despite the limitations imposed by his physical condition. Despite facing these health issues, Collins remained incredibly resilient and dedicated to his job. Despite his deteriorating health, he persisted in touring and performing. He took a nasty tumble in his hotel room in 2017, cutting up his eye and necessitating stitches. He was forced to postpone a few performances due to this tragedy, but he swiftly got back on stage and continued making songs. Collins sat through the entirety of his final tour with Genesis, the Domino Tour from 2021 to 2022. So that his dad could concentrate on singing and interacting with the crowd, Collins' son Nick Collins took up drumming. A significant turning point in his career, Phil Collins' health difficulties tested his perseverance and adaptation. Collins was unfazed by the obstacles presented by his spine injuries and hearing loss. He continued to perform with an unwavering passion for music. His unwavering determination and extraordinary skill allowed him to triumph over these challenges and keep making and sharing music. The last Domino Tour, which Genesis started on in 2021, was their last run of live performances. One of the many reasons this tour was monumental was that it featured Nick Collins, son of Phil Collins, who took over drummer responsibilities. It was both a practical necessity and a symbolic passing of the torch that Nick participated in the performance, as Phil Collins' serious health problems, including nerve injuries that prohibited him from playing the drums, necessitated it. It was symbolic for Nick Collins to be on stage. In addition to establishing a heartwarming familial bond, it highlighted the band's heritage being passed down through the generations. Nick contributed a youthful vigor and technical prowess to the concerts, drawing from his upbringing watching his great father perform. Even though Phil was physically unable to play drums, his ability to imitate his father's manner allowed Genesis to continue playing with their distinctive sound and put on electrifying shows. At the last Domino Tour, Phil Collins was experiencing a range of emotions. The joy of singing live again and reuniting with his fans was overwhelming, on the one hand. However, his impairments were continually brought to light by the physical toll of his health problems. Collins performed the entire tour while seated, frequently reaching for a cane to steady herself. His singing was strong and full of the profound feeling that only comes from living a full life. Collins has spoken about the tour with a mix of emotions in interviews. Although he was appreciative of the chance to play with Genesis one more time, he was realistic about the fact that this tour would probably be his last. Viewers were moved to tears by Collins' performance, which showcased his unwavering commitment to his work despite his hardships. Fans and bandmates alike showered Genesis with praise and support during their farewell performances. The band's keyboardist Tony Banks spoke about the emotional impact of the tour, stating, "It's been a terrible time for Phil, but his courage and resolve to be on stage and share these moments with us and the audience is incredibly remarkable." Bassist and guitarist Mike Rutherford echoed Collins' words of encouragement. Despite his struggles, Phil has remained dedicated to this tour, demonstrating his love of performing and his concern for Genesis's legacy. It is a testament to the band's perseverance that Nick is now playing drums. The performances deeply affected the audience. A large number of people went on social media to convey their appreciation and awe. When Phil Collins performed with Genesis for the final time, it was an emotional event, according to one fan who tweeted about it. Even though he was sick, his enthusiasm and commitment were obvious. To his father's great pride, Nick performed an outstanding job on drums. It was a moving reminder of Phil Collins's remarkable career and the influence he has had on music, another admirer said, as they watched him perform those legendary songs live. Being a witness to it was both beautiful and bittersweet. Particularly noteworthy was the final performance on March 26, 2022, at London's O2 Arena. A feeling of closure and introspection was evident as Collins spoke to the crowd. As he spoke, clearly moved, he announced the end of the period. In honor of the band's illustrious history and Collins' remarkable trip, the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Phil Collins's farewell performances with Genesis were emotional and moving. The tour showcased his doggedness and the deep connection he has with his music and fans. Nick Collins taking over the drums for Genesis during the concerts was also a way to transfer the band's legacy onto the next generation. Fans and fellow musicians' reactions highlight Collins's immense influence on the music business and the unwavering admiration and love he continues to get. You have our gratitude for watching our coverage. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like, and share it. If you want to see more riveting videos on the lives of your beloved celebs, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Keep an eye on your screen because the next video is about to load.